Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be tuning in from, joining us from. Jason, I want to say hello, thank you, welcome to another Industry Insights. Jason, we are kind of up there. I'm just looking. This is episode 41 of Industry Insights. 4-1. Yeah, kind of wild to think about, huh?
That is absolutely amazing. And as much as I think we all have some Zoom fatigue, this is actually one of the highlights of my week. Not only the chance to kind of share ideas with you, but also hearing from where folks are from, fielding questions from the Veeam faithful and the Veeam wannabes. One of the highlights of the week, man. 41 weeks and counting.
Excellent stuff. And speaking of good stuff, we released now, not even 2 weeks ago, it would have been Wednesday, March 24th, if I check off to the calendar, version 11. And there's been a lot about that. I mean, we had a preamble at Veeam leading up to the release, then after the release. But for today's topic, we've been hitting people with a lot of research because I believe it's now 4 out of the industry's 5 largest ever research studies done in the market. We have actually commissioned from a third-party perspective, meaning blind, no one knew it was Veeam. So although we're not analysts anymore, we're doing a lot of analysis and a lot of research work, which has been great fun to share. We're going to kind of turn it around a little bit. And even though other people, our colleagues, may have parsed through version 11, it's kind of a version 11 redux, meaning a couple of your favorite things, a couple of my favorite things, a couple things that are maybe a little under the radar, still impactful, but maybe didn't get star billing. But before we dive into that, I want to encourage everyone, because Jason alluded to it. If you're tuning in from some location, give a shout out. You've probably seen that before, our world map, if you tuned in prior. If not, just put it in the comments in LinkedIn Live, hi from wherever you're from. Of course, if you have any questions or any comments related to Veeam product, etc., we'll try to answer those as well. We do have a team monitoring that, and they send us messages, so you'll see us look over off to the side if things come in. But Jason, maybe let's tee up. We're talking version 11, but prior to that, of course, version 10, almost exactly a year prior. And one of the things I think is kind of amazing, you and I have been in backup for a bit of time now, and it's very common for organizations to intentionally lag behind on versions of software, especially backup software, because that is your recovery of last resort, right? You want to be oftentimes very prudent. But let's talk through a little bit about last year, meaning version 10. We had an enormous number of downloads, didn't we?
Yeah, it was 700,000 downloads of them. Now, to be fair, I am 3 of those, just so you know. So then there was another 699,997 people that each downloaded it, but I actually did download it 3 times because I put the community edition on a couple small environments that I helped support along the way, and that was more than good enough. But yeah, 700,000. It is amazing that after all of these years, the day that our stuff comes out, people want the features. People have been waiting for the features. It's a wonderful balance act between the transparency that Veeam has and saying, it's coming, here's what you should be planning for, here's what you should be aligning with, and then balancing that with, we will not release product until it is time, right? And making sure that the day that it comes out, it is ready. It is ready, right? And so when that gate opens, man, those downloads fly.
Yeah, and I just want to double click on 2 important things you said. So we get to this number of 700,000, counting the no charge or community edition downloads as well, because we actually do glean information from that, meaning on our forums, we do host any kind of bug concerns, even from the no charge feature. We do a best can do response on that. We also entertain feature requests from that. So that's part of what we do to help harden the product, but it's also a significant piece of our give back to the community. But double clicking on what you just mentioned, Jason, I've worked for backup development organizations, and the date was very much market or sales driven, meaning the date was immutable, like this is the wedding day. I don't care what you and the bride look like, what kind of condition you're in, 10 a.m., this is happening. And I don't care if you guys are getting along or not, this is what's going to go down. Well, to your point, though, our product management lead, Anton Gostev, always says, when will it be available? When it's ready. And that is a factual statement, meaning when the slope of discovery and the error rate and closure rate of bugs flattens out to an acceptable limit, we're going to release that out into the wild, and people are going to know that it's safe, that they can trust it.
Yeah. So think about that for a second. So our community are backup professionals and people that manage backup professionals, right? So by nature, we are risk adverse, right? Why would we ever want to introduce risk as part of our job in protecting our sovereign data, right? So of course, if you're risk adverse, you don't run stuff early. You don't get bloody with production data. So we are ultra conservative from that perspective. The other side of that, though, is I also worked for a software company once upon a time, the opposite direction of what you had, Dave, where we would lock down the product and it'd be done, and then it'd take like 5 months for the launch to get planned. And meanwhile, customers had 5 months without those features because you couldn't get to it, right? Instead, we would rather get the product out. Marketing can kind of catch up. I mean, we have some marketing that happens on day one, but really all of the readiness enablement happens after it's baked so that you know what you're getting. So a different culture than anything I've ever seen here, but it's always been first and foremost about you can bank on this. Anyway.
Yeah. And before we get into V11, I'm told we've already got a few updates on the world map. If we could take a quick look at that. We have at least more than half a dozen countries. So you're in Texas, I'm in Colorado, our producer's in Georgia, and our production assistant is in Romania. But we also have India, Egypt, Panama, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
Romania, I mentioned that, I apologize. France and Dubai. Dubai, or United Emirates over all the Middle East, has been really a staple of this series now.
Did you just have a Facebook post last week from Dubai? It was your last business trip before the world locked down?
Yeah, it was. It was my last international. Was actually today. 1 year ago today, I would have been arriving back from Dubai in San Francisco, and then, ironically, 1 year from this Wednesday was the last time I was on an airplane, and that was in Denver. And who would have known a year later I would have moved from Arizona to Colorado? So who could tell what was going to happen then, right? But one thing we can count on is Veeam. And do
nice
you want
to
did you like that transition? I worked all weekend on that transition just to make sure it really punched.
You can tell. Yeah.
So hitting now version 11, which is awesome because it is one more than 10. So if we look at version 11, you may have seen a graphic that looks like this, meaning we took the half a dozen, 5 kind of key items, and they're key items for a reason, Jason, not to say that those aren't well chosen, but we want to double click on a couple of these, but expand out even further. But we would be probably remiss if we didn't hit the headlines. Yes, continuous data protection using the VMware VIO filter drivers, reliable ransomware protection, hardening a Linux repository that does not depend on proprietary hardware. And I say proprietary in quotes because it's oftentimes relabeled Supermicro or Intel hardware on a proprietary bezel. And then longer-term archive, which we'll double-click on, expanded instant recovery, which Veeam pioneered now 11 years ago, keeping with 11, which we'll double-click on, and then the Veeam-powered backup as a service, disaster recovery as a service activity. Now, we won't go deeper on BASDRAS, Jason, but here's, speaking of time, it was a decade ago, 10 years ago at the end of this month, that Veeam announced its partner program. So even though a lot of people know Veeam obviously is downloadable software, we do have 27,000 global partners, about 6,000 of them that are heavily transacting in many, many different countries. So as with all of these, we don't want to sell them short. We just want to now go focus on some of the things that people may not have heard before, frankly.
Yeah, a huge shout out to all the partners out there that deliver BAS and DRAS. You know, so it's been roughly 31 years for me since I first got into backup, and when I first got into backup, I was at a reseller. Right, those first several years, I was at a reseller, and the reason is because backup has almost always been partner driven. Right, you know, the people that you trust to deploy your servers and to manage your licenses and to help you architect your plan, it's not just because of the sale and the transaction, it's because of the expertise. Right. And so certainly as we look at our cloud partners, those folks that live and breathe backup architecture and best practices all day long, huge part of the Veeam ecosystem. So a happy 10th birthday to all of our partners that are out there. But dude, it's 11 minutes past the hour. Let's talk about some 11 features. We got some
I think first and foremost, we should start with tape because one, I consider myself to be like the last proponent or whatever, the tape apologist. And I got up at 4 a.m. this morning, my time, in anticipation of the new survey for the Gartner Magic Quadrant coming out. Turns out I rushed the gun by about 5.5 hours. So I've been pretty caffeinated and just like itching to go. But I did actually give a listen already to this week's Restored All podcast from Curtis Preston and Prasanna, and I won't try to butcher Prasanna's last name, but they were kind of doing a historical conversation with one of their colleagues or Curtis's former colleagues around tape, and it was a great trip down memory lane. However, tape is not just in the distant past or memories, and really, in all seriousness, Jason and everyone else, Veeam treats tape like a first-class storage target or repository, meaning we do invest R&D and QA activity into tape. Version 11 continues to expand tape activity. Now, there's been some of the discussion around how we've nuanced GFS tracking and tape, actually simplify it so you have fewer restore points. But I just wanted to verbally riff with you on a couple of things. By couple, I mean like almost a full handful of things that we introduced. So this is Veeam code. It's not, reliant on some third party and tool, et cetera. It's fully integrated into the product. Veeam has supported LTO 3 and above for many, many years now, and we continue to, obviously. But one of the really interesting things we introduced in version 11 is now tape cloning. And that in and of itself may or may not sound exciting if you're a tape person, believe it or not, or maybe if you're not a tape person, believe it or not. It's been a highly requested feature. But the trick with tape cloning is to, as the name implies, make another copy of tape, potentially to do that for migration, like from LTO 8 to LTO 9, or maybe you've jumped it up
to LTO 8. I mean, it's a great refresh mechanism.
It's an absolutely wonderful refresh mechanism, or maybe you just want to make an extra copy. I mean, for literally less than $100 right now, what you can do, the amount of data that you can store that's portable as your backup to your backup, as it were. So we do that, but we do that in a way that integrates with the Veeam tracking catalog, meaning then we're going to understand all of the different tape ball series or labels that are involved. We know how to track that. We know how to request that. But we've done another number of other cool things too. I mean, that's just part and parcel of what features that we've had around tape verification before you migrate. If something were to go wrong, we have a command to restore everything, restore all content from tape so you can at least rip everything back. Some other things that we did in version 11, we have the ability to go into maintenance mode for a library. A historical artifact can be that something like a tape application can allocate or try to take exclusive use of a library. Also try to take exclusive use of all of the drives or many of the drives in there. So we can go into maintenance mode if you're, say, in a proof of concept with Veeam, still using another piece of backup software. You can tell Veeam, hey, go into maintenance mode. Don't do rescans or things like that on the library. Leave it alone. Also, from a backup job perspective, you can say, hey, I want to, for this period of time, give a limit of, say, 3 of my 5 tape drives to this. Or conversely, hey, it's the weekend. We're going to take an extra full backup for some specific reason, unleash all of the drives on this. And the last thing I'll say really quickly on tape. We did some partner specific things, one for NetApp, one for HPE. So for NetApp, we can actually handle the .cab extension files, meaning the cluster aware backups for the SVMs, or what used to be called V servers. And we support HP Catalyst copy to tape. Catalyst copy is HPE's deduplication algorithm, or really interface going between store once deduplication appliances, keeping it in that reduced or dehydrated format. We can now pass that through to tape. So a little bit, I wanted to start off on purpose, something that's a little bit off the beaten path, but make the point that if you've made an investment in tape, it's still a valid investment with Veeam.
Dude, I think you could actually talk about tape all day if we let you. We're not going to let you. But
I am so caffeinated, I feel like I could.
I think you could, but we should probably not do that. Look, bottom line is that as much as tape may not be sexy to everybody, we have never been in a more regulated world than we are today. We have never had more pressure between litigation and regulatory compliance. I mean, pick your favorite pain in the butt thing that happens beyond operational backup, and almost all of them say, "Are you holding data long enough?" Right? Are you air gapping it? Are you geographic separation? There's lots of reasons for that. That said, the other side of that same long-term retention conversation is around cloud. Now, I'm like Dave. I'm a big tape person, but I'm a tape person for things that have long-term retention, say 10 years or more, anything that has regulatory mandates, because it's much easier to bring a tape cartridge into a courtroom than it is to bring a cloud into a courtroom. So for all those reasons, I like tape. But for everything else, I'm a huge fan of cloud. Now, we've done some fantastic stuff in cloud for this year. If we could go ahead and bring up the sober slide for V11, let's just kind of talk out what we did for that. Mark, if you can bring that up for me, awesome. So sober is our scale out backup repository, and basically what that means is that we create a multi-tiered storage architecture where you simply say, I want to back up these workloads into this, and I'm going to use the word bucket with a lowercase b on it. And then from there, we will magically move it through its various stages, whether on the left-hand side, this is disk, and that includes native disk, NAS boxes, dedupe appliances, hardened repositories. So that's a big one. If you have not looked yet at doing a Linux hardened repository, turn any Linux box you want into an immutable platform. Huge benefit for on-prem. But then, candidly, most organizations probably don't need more than 60, 90 days on-prem, and then get your data out of the building, right? You know, all those longer term copies, the usefulness of that data, unless you're doing data mining, starts to really taper off pretty quick. So for a while now, we've been using capacity tier. That's any S3 compatible on-prem storage with an immutable option, by the way. IBM Object Storage. We added Google Cloud Platform. We've already had Amazon S3 and Azure. What we added for V11, super fun, is the archive tier. And that's really taking that to truly the coldest, deepest, cheapest cloud repository you can. And again, it's checkbox. Right? Your first checkbox is, do you want to send it to a cloud as a second tier? And then your second checkbox is, and would you like to go to colder storage after that? Now, I'm a little simplistic on that, but not much. Week and a half ago, I think I waited like a day and a half. But my Friday, week before last, I upgraded my servers to V11. The first thing I wanted to do was add archive storage to it. I already had an Azure Blob account. I was already using Azure as my retention tier. And it really was. I went in, I added a cold tier to that, mounted it to the same sober repository, and then it just said, okay, right? 2 checkboxes later for my aging policy, and it just rolled right out. It does require a proxy because I handled some of the moving, and it looked at my Azure credentials, figured out what I needed, provisioned a proxy for me, and then just kept on going. I think I spent 15 minutes, maybe, probably 11. I spent 11 minutes in order to enable archive. It was fantastically easy to do, and all of a sudden now I am cheaper, deeper, and colder than I ever was on my cloud. So huge hats off to the folks from that. And then I love the little green boxes. Whatever tier of storage you want, you can make that immutable. The only thing more pervasive right now than the need for long-term retention is the need for air gapping and immutability. Can I get an amen on that one?
Yeah, amen. And of course, that's where tape can play a complementary component. I'm going to find a way to work tape into every single aspect here. But
Dang.
Jason, you're going to double click further on archive tier, or was that the
No,
full
this is it,
treatment?
man. I mean, the whole idea was just use what you got, right?
Yeah,
Use
yeah.
whatever is available to you. You can so there are some great benefits from using dedupe appliances on-prem. Certainly, whatever's production storage or what was production grade last year makes an absolutely fantastic storage layer for this year's backups. Especially if you're doing things like data labs and doing data mining and DevOps acceleration, et cetera. But then please add your favorite cloud. We got several to choose from. And then as those APIs are available, we unlock immutable versions of those clouds. We unlock cold, cheap, and deep versions. Got to be excited about that. So I think we got a question, don't we?
Yeah, which it's a tape question, so I think we really should take this. It's from Edris that says, is there a way or will there be one on the roadmap to use Veeam Explorers to look up data in tapes directly from those tapes? That's a good question. I'm actually going to take that as a investigation into feature requests because I am embarrassed to say I don't know the answer to that. So I'll turn it into my goal to find out the answer to that. I can think of a way you can do this. It would still need VBR stood up, but let me go double click on that. And Jason, just quick comment on what you were mentioning with that scale out backup repository and archive tier. One of the things I love about that whole process is you do the work up front before you even take the first backup. You've created really an end-to-end policy. It's end-to-end because it's first backup all the way through data destruction. And you don't have to go and sort of garbage collect later on. Now it's 5 months from now, 5 years from now, what are we going to send to other kinds of targets where there's a lot of opportunity for failure versus just having a policy on day one?
Yeah, again, the way you should think about this is think about it like those dynamic fluid storage arrays that people pioneered over a decade ago, right? These are tiers within a single repository, and you can grow each repository at its own rate, right? So if your cheap and deep needs to grow, then that archive bucket grows. If your high speed tier needs to grow, then just add more disks to it, add more dedupe appliances to it. But you can grow each tier linearly without growing the rest of it. We're not doing boxed block units, right? And all you do is write to this one target. And then everything else, we take care of fluidly moving it as necessary. So huge elegance in the design. Time check, though. We got to talk about more than long-term retention. We got 6 minutes left. Pick your one other favorite feature, dude.
So let me give you one. I'm going to jump ahead into an all-in-one efficiency, and then we're going to get to the map really quickly. But I'm going to verbally talk through this. If people do follow Anton Gostev's Sunday digest called The Word, about 3 Sundays ago, Jason, he released a spec of what we've done around version 11, but also proved with our friends at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise at their test bed. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of talk about trying to scale out and look for various ways to disaggregate components. And sometimes we have to do that so that we've got the components spread across to handle the workload or the throughput or whatever the case may be. However, there's the opposite effect now with single systems becoming so powerful that they have the CPU, the I/O bandwidth to be able to put not only all the Veeam components on one platform, but to be able to use that as the repository itself. So I'll just give you a couple quick drive-bys in this and then tell you the punchline. In version 11 software, we did some NUMA awareness. We did some unbuffered writes. We did some shared memory protocol transport improvements. If you don't know what any of that means, that's okay. It just means we made a single system more efficient. Then we went to the HPE labs, took an Apollo 4510 Gen 10 system, which is basically, Jason, just a beast. I mean, think of it as like a Hummer, right? It can store and can compute like nobody's business. Long story short, with one instance of Veeam and everything thrown in onto this Apollo 4510, we're able to document 10 gigabit per second. I mean, that is a really pretty amazing throughput. And that's not like at peak, that's sustained.
Wow. You are Such a nerd. I just love working with you. All right, so that's your favorite or that's your one other highlight is performance enhancements. So mine is around fluidity. It's my new word of the day for Monday. Let's bring up the platform slide for a second. So one of the things that also came out as part of the week of V11 was also the shipping of Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure V2. One of the things about our cloud products, just so you're aware, version 1 of any cloud product is native backup for that workload. So if you're looking at our diagram on the left-hand side, the Amazon admin can back up Amazon, the Azure admin can back up Azure, the Google admin can back up Google. Great. When we do version 2 of any workload, the key fundamental aspect is to make that an integrated citizen as part of Veeam backup and replication. So when VBR 11 shipped, the next day, Veeam backup for Microsoft Azure V2 shipped, and that makes it able to do what you see on the right-hand side. So with any one of our cloud products, you can back up natively, but you can restore it either back on-prem, lower left-hand corner, or to another cloud, or to another region, whatever you want. Once we get to V2, though, with platform services, now we can actually manage and provision the protection of your cloud-hosted workloads running in Amazon EC2, running in Azure hosting. We can provision the protection of those. We can automate the recovery of those. We can send them back and forth. Every time we hit V2 on a cloud-based product, we get some amazing fluidity there. If one of your goals is hybrid, right? What better way to move those workloads around than to do one last pristine backup and then use the backup as your method of seeding where the data is going to go. Now you know you have that recoverable copy. You have that net if you need it. And then, oh, by the way, once you're there, then the native Veeam backup tools will continue to protect that as a production workload. If you are hybrid, you have to spend a few minutes and look at this. And so one of the things we're celebrating in V11 is letting platform services handle our second cloud. And yes, when the Google product goes to V2, you should expect the same. When our for cloud product comes out in V2, it'll do the same. As we add clouds, this is how this works. But truly hybrid, comprehensive, centralized management. This is a drop the mic moment.
That's awesome. I'm going to try to give a 60-seconder here for a feature that Veeam pioneered 11 years ago called Instant Recovery or Instant Mount. And one of the interesting things that we've done, actually several, is we've expanded further. Version 10 expanded this capability. Version 11 now allows us to instantly recover SQL Server, Oracle databases, NAS shares, as well as we've always had the ability to recover any of our image backups to vSphere. Now we can recover any of our image backups to Hyper-V as well. And we can also go cross-pollinating between them as well, which I think is even more interesting.
Yeah, let's put an asterisk on that before we hit the map one more time. Think about this, instant recovery for Hyper-V. Now, you may not be running Hyper-V in your production environment, and that's okay. But when your production data center is underwater, including all of your documentation and your materials on your ESX licenses and everything else, the fact that you can from anywhere, including Azure, download a free copy of Windows, it comes with Hyper-V, spin it up, and immediately reattach an Azure or S3 bucket to it and start recovering data from a disaster recovery perspective, that is beyond freaking huge to be able to do that. So instant VM recovery for Hyper-V, even if you're not in production with it, is something you ought to be thinking about as part of your potential DR plan.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to your word of the day, fluidity. If I take data mobility, cloud mobility, and data portability, munge that all together, it's really about accessing data where and when you need it for a variety of reasons. So
Amen.
We could keep going, but let's take us out. Let's hit the map one more time. Alina's been working hard on updating that. We've got India, Egypt, Panama, Romania, France, Dubai, London, Istanbul, Sweden, Spain, New York, Kuwait, South Africa, Arizona, Portugal, as well as some of the other states and countries that we mentioned, including, I think, Panama, if I didn't already mention them.
Mexico's on the list. Hadn't seen them earlier. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Excellent. So thank you all for that. And coming up this Friday, speaking of recovery scenarios, Jason, Our good friends Rick Vanover and Melissa Palmer will be detailing now in version 11. We are up to 91 different recovery scenarios. That's like 90, but one more, much like version 10 is 10, but one more. So we always do one to grow on. And then a week from today, you're going to be off now. You get a little bit of time for good behavior. And so, yeah, Jason's going to get out of the force field for a period of time. And our buddy Michael Cade, who is on temporary assignment to Caston, our containers group, is going to be sitting in with me, basically trying to educate those of us that aren't container experts a little bit more about containers. So got a lot of stuff coming your way. Enjoy vacation in roughly a weekish from now, Jason. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hey, and hopefully by this time next week, we've got 70, 80,000 downloads of version 11.
Fantastic. Have a great week. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay positive. We'll see you next time.